Welcome to our Instagram and Facebook Live Thursday. So happy that you're here. And today we are talking about 3 ways to do love differently. So, we've got Valentine's Day coming up here around the corner. And I thought I would take a few moments to share about ways that we can show up differently around love. And I want to, really sort of set the record straight here around who this is for. And it's really for you, regardless of where you are in your relationship world. So if you are single, if you have had a bad breakup or divorce, if you are in a great relationship and feeling good, if you are looking for love, if you are allergic to love, no matter where you are, this is for you because the bottom line is, and the secret is, it really begins and ends with the relationship you have with yourself. So it is about falling in love with you first. And I know that that might seem at the outset perhaps a little corny, or it might seem like, is that really what's going on here? But the truth is that the the way that you're going to be able to show up in relationship and show up as you is dependent upon the way in which you're willing to be honest with yourself. So when we don't tell the truth to ourselves, we create chaos. And when we don't tell the truth to ourselves, we betray ourselves first and foremost. So any betrayal in a relationship of any sort is really self-betrayal first. And I want to support you in being able to be really true with you. So this is why it's most important that you put the attention on the relationship that you have with yourself first and foremost. The attention you put on your relationship with you and the work that you do on your relationship with you has the most impact on your entire life. And this can often sound a little counterintuitive. So in other words, we might think, if I pay attention to myself and I put my attention on me, how is that actually going to be good for everybody else? And I'm here to tell you that it is actually the number one way you can ensure that you're going to have connected and intimate relationships if you are willing to show up in your own truth. So the work that we are looking at here around loving yourself and around the changes you're going to make in your own relationship with yourself is actually going to have the biggest impact on all the relationships in your life. So I want to talk about 3 ways that you can show up and do love differently. And one is really to stay anchored in who you are and what you want. So this is about knowing your non-negotiables. This is about being selfish. This is about imagining. I often talk about self-care, self-love, and selfish as being 3 sisters whose job it is to support you in loving yourself and honoring yourself. So staying anchored in who you are and what you want. So think about it this way, especially if you happen to be single and dating and wanting a relationship. What would happen if you went out on your first date, whether it's in person or on Zoom? What would happen if you went on your first date as you? So no persona, no chameleon, no trying to second guess what the other person wants, no trying to be chosen. So in other words, what if you were to go out on that first date knowing that you get to make the choice, knowing that you get to do the picking and the choosing? It's a really different energy that we create when we know that we can create our reality around what we want versus think that we're at the mercy of someone else choosing us. And if you're already in a relationship, notice how you can stay consciously aware of continuing to choose to stay, continuing to choose to open up and be honest. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. What can you do to stay in the zone of taking responsibility instead of feeling like a victim or blaming the other person? So again, this first way of doing love different is really staying anchored in who you are and what you want. So knowing what is okay for you, knowing what your priorities are, knowing what your non-negotiables are, knowing what you can live with and what you can't or won't live without. The next one is cozying up to conflict. So this is a personal favorite of mine. So you can stay connected in relationship even if there's conflict. Most of us who are conflict avoidant or fear conflict are under the impression that a relationship can't sustain conflict and that conflict's the worst thing that could happen. But here's what I want you to know. When you're avoiding external conflict, you're creating more internal conflict. So I want to invite you to cozy up to conflict, to see that conflict is simply an illumination of our differences. Conflict doesn't have to turn into an argument or a fight. Conflict doesn't have to create separation or isolation. Conflict simply is the illumination of our differences, and it's the way we get to see. That's where you're coming from. This is where I'm coming from. And it's not about trying to get the other person over to our position. And it's not about feeling the need to cross our own boundary into someone else's experience. So notice if you have the idea that the goal of relating, any kind of relating, if you have the goal of relating as being harmony at all cost, because I'll tell you right now, if you do, it's coming at a very high cost to you. So if you're constantly in that loop in your head of what do I need to do or say to make everything be okay, if you are constantly trying to avoid any sort of discord or disharmony, what you're doing is you are creating more internal conflict. You're creating more internal chaos. So you can stay connected in a relationship even when there is some conflict. By avoiding conflict, you create more. And when you avoid conflict, what you're doing is you are essentially broadcasting your own inability to stand in your truth. So what happens is that's when we're abandoning ourselves, we're suppressing and we're repressing, we're packaging ourselves to be digestible to others. So staying connected in conflict, you are able to remember who you are, where you are, and again, what's most important to you for you, as opposed to feeling like it's your job to convince someone else. And the other piece in here is to recognize, where can you really begin to meet your own needs? Where are you looking outside of yourself for unmet needs to be met? And where can you begin meeting your own? So when we're avoiding conflict, what's also happening is we are not wanting to look at the bigger picture, because it's not just about a fight. It's not just about an argument, an impending argument that we're fearing. When we're avoiding conflict, the deeper issue is we are ultimately afraid that the relationship itself doesn't hold water. But we don't want to look on that level. We want to stay on the surface of, if I just avoid a fight, if I stop rocking the boat, I see your note there, Sarah. If I stop rocking the boat, if I don't rock the boat, then no harm is going to come. And the truth is that what we're really doing is trying to, what we're really doing is trying to control and manage and manipulate someone else. So, Laura, I see your question here. Can I talk about the difference between a need and a claim? So, what I think you're asking is about the difference between a need and a request. Is that what you mean by claim? So, if we want to make a request to someone, we can invite them to see. We can invite them in by naming what's important to us and seeing if they're available for that. Yes, okay, good. So the request is we are presenting or proposing something to someone else and seeing if they're available for it. Not every need is a request. But many of us frame our needs as something that we think someone else has to provide. So that's where I'm saying to check in with yourself around what are your own needs that you can satisfy. What are the needs that you can take care of first? This is a great segue into the third way we do love differently, which is having healthy boundaries and honest communication. So, first, our boundaries are the limits that we set around what we will or will not do, will or will not tolerate, and will or will not accept. And we want to be able to state very clearly for ourselves what our boundaries are. So my boundaries are very personal. My boundaries are between me and me, even if they involve another person. So not every boundary needs to get verbalized because it's up to me to uphold my boundaries. So I need to show myself that I'm a good candidate for trusting myself, that I'm going to take care of my own boundaries, that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, and that I'm going to take good care of myself. So this is about speaking up around what we will or will not tolerate, will or will not accept. So again, checking for yourself, where are you doing things you don't want to be doing? Where are you tolerating the intolerable? Where are you accepting the unacceptable? And boundaries give us that map. Boundaries give us that operating manual for ourselves. And when we share our boundaries with others, it's like we're giving them a piece of our puzzle. It's like we're giving them a page of our operating manual. And it's not about others changing. So this is the important piece when we come back to the conversation about a request. It's not about other people doing anything different or their behavior changing. We can involve a request. We can invite someone to do something different. However, the bottom line is we have to be willing to make a choice about what we are going to do differently. So I can name a boundary by what's okay or not okay for me. So for example, I notice that I'm uncomfortable when you have more than 2 glasses of wine at dinner. So I'm just checking in with you. Are you willing to only have 2 glasses of wine tonight? That's a request. They get to answer. Nowhere did I say you can't have more than 2 glasses of wine. I just simply asked, are you willing to only have 2 glasses of wine tonight? They have a choice. They might say no. And then we get to say, okay, so if you decide to have the 3rd glass of wine tonight, I'm just letting you know ahead of time that in order to take care of myself, I'm going to leave the table and go into the other room. Just making that up. But you know what I'm saying, because we're not really eating out at restaurants all that much, so it's not about leaving the restaurant per se. But the important thing is to get really clear on, if I make a request, that the other person isn't available for. It's not about then blaming them and going into victim mode. It's about staying in the place of, what do I need to do to take care of myself? We can look at it even in I know, I notice that you call me several times throughout the day, and I'm working and I'm busy. So I'm just letting you know ahead of time that if you call anytime before 5 p.m., your call's going to go to voicemail. And I'll call you back when I'm done with my day. Again, I'm not saying don't call. I'm not telling someone what to do or not do. I'm simply letting them know what works for me. That's a big difference. It's a big difference around honest communication. It's a big difference between having healthy boundaries and remembering that when we set the boundaries, we are moving ourselves out of blame and victim into responsibility and empowerment. And that is what is going to support the relationship as well. That's what's going to support the relationship as well. So these are just a few things. I'm scratching the surface here around ways that you can do love differently. It really is about, essentially, how can you fall deeply in love with yourself so that you don't lose yourself in love with another? How do you stay so connected to you and anchored in you that you don't lose yourself in love with another? How can you cozy up to conflict and still stay connected? And how can you put healthy boundaries in place and employ honest communication? And remember that when guilt arises in this context, if you feel guilty, it simply means that you're on the right track. Guilt is the indicator that you're on the right track here, that you're on the right track to taking care of yourself and honoring yourself. So, as Valentine's Day approaches, I invite you to look at the ways that you can give yourself the love that you need. Ask yourself, what's the most self-loving action I can take today? What's the most self-honoring choice I can make today? And do that. All right, darlings. Happy to be with you today. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you again next week.